you want to talk for a few minutes about how you made the film and how you got started and the inspiration?
Sure. Well, our director is Alex Gibney, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. He's on a shoot, but Alex started his career as a journalist, and his films, he really likes to take on institutions of power. This film was taking on not so much institutions of power. He really, I think, this was a very personal film, and he was out to name names, as you can see, and I think do something that was a little bit more editorial, almost like an editorial you'd read in the newspaper. When he found out that this congressional district was the poorest congressional district in the country, next to, the wealthiest, he was like, well, that's the film right there. And it is obviously focused much more on the institution of power, less on the Bronx side of things. But I think he was out, as he said, to say that the game is rigged, and he really wanted to not just take on institutions, but specific people. It's like, let's just call this out in as strong a way possible.
Just like one of the most interesting things for me working on the film was this decline of union stuff, and sort of how that's. I feel like there's a lot of talk about deregulation of the financial markets and sort of tax policy and stuff, but just the way that there's no opposing force on the other side was something that I hadn't really known about, I guess, or I hadn't thought about that as being such an important part of the story.
Yorman, do you want to talk for a moment about how did you feel seeing this film, and how does it relate to your experience growing up, and also to the economic undertakings that you're involved in?
Yeah, sure. So I think the film is great at starting a dialogue around inequality in general, with a focus on income inequality, and it definitely applies to the Bronx, and beyond just the poorest congressional district, which are lines that are racially motivated and are shifting every 10 years. We're the poorest urban county in the United States of America. Right? So I think the at least for me, the film, and also because of my experience growing up here, made me think a lot about why that is, and why we, a lot of us in the borough started what's called the Bronx Cooperative Development Initiative, which is something I'm one of the coordinators on. Is the heads of these community-based organizations, which are doing a lot of work to address this, sort of came together and said, our organizing has been getting better and better, right? The Bronx was burning in the 70s. Community-based organizations really got together to stop that and try to restore our housing stock and build a really robust community organizing environment in the Bronx, and I believe we have one. But even though we've been doing that, the borough has been getting poorer and poorer and poorer, and we see as part of the reason why that is our organizing needs to be focused on owning and controlling the assets that drive policy change. So what we're doing right now is sort of coming together, building a multi-stakeholder table to build wealth and ownership for low-income people in the Bronx. There's a couple sort of strategies that we're employing, but I'd want to stop there.
Peter, you formerly worked on Wall Street, which I didn't know until, and I brought you up here so that we could attack you and beat up on you. But talking to you, I find that we're going to have a very hard time doing that. But you do work on Park Avenue. You work with people from Park Avenue in Manhattan, in the wealthy districts. Can you talk about how the film, if you feel it's accurate or biased, or how it relates to your personal experience?
But the inspirational moment for me in the film was at the end when the narrator says, without popular democracy, all the giants of our economy will go to the top. The revolution begins in the Bronx. And the elephant in the room that was not named is Michael Bloomberg, our mayor, who is one of the richest men in this country. He's the 7th richest man in Forbes. He's got more billions than all of these cats, and he's in all the photographs. And basically every single progressive legislation we have put through the city council, Chris Quinn and the council, whether it's living wage, prevailing wage, paid sick, police reform, Bloomberg has vetoed and tied up in court, and they're down. And so basically, Bill de Blasio has run on the message of this film on this Tale of Two Cities narrative. The film ends with the medieval imagery of a moat, and you've got the castle of these Park Avenue, castles that are trying to keep the plebeians out across the river. I mean, basically, de Blasio and Charlene and Dante, they have worked this, so they're going to be in Gracie Mansion in January. The question is, what are we going to do? How are we going to offer democratic alternatives to this kind of like capitalist monarchy? How are we going to begin to democratize the economy? Because at my church, when we make a difficult decision in the church, we have a congregational meeting. And basically it's like, if 50% or more, voted through, then that's the decision we make. So we have a kind of popular democracy, even in the church government. But we know, like this film shows, that the politicians, like Chuck Schumer, our senator, are bought out. And there's no collective will to push through the desires of the people. So how do we work for economic democracy today?
Can we take one last question here?
It's more of just highlighting some of the pieces that were spoken about tonight. So I think part of what Yorman talked about in the beginning was that there's some racial implications, right? And definitely some racial motivations to why the Bronx is the way that it is. And I think part of what I was hoping, and it's like so long and you can't even write, is to talk about like what actually racial justice really looks like, because there was a lot of conversation about billionaires, but there was not a lot of conversation about white billionaires, right? So I think that is something, a different layer that I think, we tend to shy around from talking about.
I appreciate you bringing the issue of racism up, because that's what Mike started out when you were talking about lynching. And I grew up in Mississippi as a white boy, but I saw the racial injustice to African Americans, and that's why I'm so committed to this anti-racist analysis, which is that every institution in America was set up to benefit white males. And that continues to this day. And so putting your two comments together, we need an anti-racist, feminist vision to push into a prophetic intercultural future. And part of that, interestingly, it's a lot of white boys that are named and lined up. But some of the white women, philanthropists in New York City, like Helen LaKelly Hunt and Abigail Disney and Masa Pulaski, for example, in the Citizens Committee for Children, right now, New York State is one of 2 states that you can get arrested when you're 16 versus 18. And these women, these rich white women are trying to fund this movement to get New York State to raise the age to 18, which is in this whole milieu of Trayvon Martin and the struggle for racial justice and the stand your ground laws and all of these things that we're fighting for. And so I would just say, as we move ahead, because so many whites that are in this invented middle class have been coming down, you got the super elite, we got the Occupy Wall Street 1% point, but there are grounds for a deep solidarity between anti-racist whites, and I see a lot of the leadership from the women and people of color to work together. And so I think trying to do the deep reconciliation work of forging those links is a key part to moving ahead. Because after 12 years of Bloomberg, we are going to have a new administration in a few months. And so we got to start strategizing now what we want that to look like and how we're going to build this democratic governance and really work for a more gender just and racially just future.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you all so much.